Good afternoon, everybody. Back to the stories about the Pryor family. This one in particular has like three parts to it. So it's really different. Most of the time, I feel like I'm kind of going in a direction and might veer off a little bit. But this is kind of almost like a trilogy. Um, to entertain myself, I call it the Oopa Loopa and the red dress and the empty box. So I sat here for a while before I pushed the button for to start recording, trying to figure out which part of the story should I tell first. Well, I decided um, for the ones of you that are new that are coming on, I have been working with this one family, and their last name is Pryor, and there's been a lot of mysteries trying to put it all together. And the one thing that I deal with quite often is the fact that my parents were both only children. And so growing up, I had no aunts, uncles, cousins per se of my own. And like when my mother's true aunts, they died when I was very young, and so I really didn't have that opportunity to build relationships with them. But when the last 11 years of my mom, um, before she passed, I would come up to her town and spend the weekends with her, and we would go cruising around and go to all the old family stuff. And then I worked in Portland at the time, and so, but several times when I'd be up there on the weekend, this lady would show up, and I knew her name was June, and my mom called her cousin, so she would still have been a cousin to me, but she was quite a bit older. She wasn't as old as my mom, but she certainly wasn't, she was older. And mom had told me off to the side a number of times that how interested June was in the genealogy and that I needed to get with June. And so the couple times that I was there when she was visiting my mother, most of theirs was talking family stuff. And but in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, here's somebody that may have some answers that I've been really looking for, especially in the area of where my grandmother. Um, so kind of one of the interesting things about my grandmother, and my sisters confirmed it, we never heard our grandma talk about her dad at all, nothing. And we kind of knew they divorced, and he remarried, and so, but all the kids stayed kind of really close in contact with their mother, not their father. So as we I think it was a 50th wedding anniversary for my parents. And this lady named June showed up. And of course, it wasn't appropriate places to say, hey, tell me everything you know about genealogy and where do we fit in together and stuff. But again, I made that mental note that the next time I saw her or I wanted to seek her out and actually sit down with her. She was getting up in years even then, but still she was driving herself around and she was going on trips. And I think her husband died when he was younger, and so she just went about her business and was very independent. And mom never could really remember, couldn't find an address for her. She just always said, June lives near Costco. Well, there's a lot of places that live near Costco, so that didn't really help me very much. But at that particular event, I was wearing a red dress, and it was a really pretty dress, but it was red, and it not necessarily, like my choice in colors. Um, at any kind of event really, but anyway, so that's kind of where the red dress comes in. And so as mom progressed along, and then she couldn't reach June at all, and nobody had June's address, so that was kind of gone. And then mom passed. um so about that same time, my brother and I got going on Ancestry, um, and we were looking at the close matches that we had, DNA matches. And this one showed up pretty close, and it was, my brother, I think, contacted him, and his handle, a lot of people don't put their names, they just put what they want to be called. And his was Rat Attack 1. So I always remember Rat Attack 1. And he had been given it, I think, as a Christmas gift. Everybody that had in the family had gotten their DNA done, and so he wasn't really used to typing very much. And but I was supplying him a lot of information, and my brother was supplying him kind of from a perspective of, my brother hadn't did it, and he learned how, and he got around the computer. So Rat Attack, uh, when we finally found out that he lived in Tillamook, Oregon. And when my mom and I were driving around, that was one of our favorite places to go, was down the Oregon coast. So we'd always go to the cheese factory. And as long as I can remember, everybody I would be with, and I'd always take people there when they were visiting because it was so fun. It was an old type factory, but it was new. It wasn't, but it was a old-fashioned thing where you could go up the stairs and look down over into the area where they were cutting the cheese and packaging the cheese, and they all wore these white nets all over their heads. And for some reason, somebody, I don't know, somebody coined them. There's the Oompa Loompa men from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And so, I felt like that was, a really good memory in my life. And I eat Tillamook cheese till now, still I'm in Denver, and I'm very partial about the kind of cheese that I like. And they had the best ice cream, and my mom and I would sit and watch our movies on the weekends and eat Tillamook ice cream. So anyway, so this Rat Attack guy said that he worked at the cheese factory, and I was like, oh my God, I have belonged to a number of genealogical societies and clubs, and, been around geneticists and people. I've taken classes in DNA, and most of them are a little bit more, I don't hear the stories, but for me, a lot of them wanted to be connected to somebody famous, like, oh, my da 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 was, Queen of England, or I'm related to um, George Washington, or there was always there's picture in their minds that they were going to run into somebody that was rich and famous, or something like that. And I never really set myself up for that, but I was so excited when I realized that I had a DNA match to the Oompa Loompa man. And I don't know to this day if Rat Attack actually works down there and wears the white hat, and he could work over in the vats where they warm the cheese and the curds. And I mean, it's a really cool. It's a place great to take to kids, but everybody likes it. They give free samples and little toothpicks, and you walk down the line and you can sample all the different cheeses, and then you can go around the corner and you can buy an ice cream cone. Or they're, you know, like fibers you don't even see any place, if you were like in a store or something like that. And so that was always just a really, so I took it like that was my claim to fame. Here I am. I have a DNA match to somebody that works at the Tillamook Cheese Factory, and that was more than enough for me. So so anyway, so between Rat Attack, though, he was really high up on the matches list, and so we were trying to figure out where he, fit into the situation. Well, as it was, he was actually, he tracked back down into being married to somebody that was related to June, and so there was this connection. And so it was kind of magical almost in a way, because I contacted Rat Attack and I said, could you, do you know about June? Carrie was her name. And he said, well, I think my dad might know something. So the whole time we're going back and forth with messages and on Ancestry. And he contacted his dad, but his dad didn't know for sure. And then they made another phone call. It went on for like weeks and months, and now it's like it's been years since I've even had any communication with them. But it was like just following the yellow brick road in a way, through all the marriages and the kids and you know but they really weren't over where the priors were, as far as, it was kind of an intermarried type situation. So anyway, eventually, somebody said she was in a retirement center, but she's still alive. I was concerned she might have already passed, and they said no, that they would call somebody else. And so then they called somebody else, and then they finally came up with the name of a retirement center where June was actually living. And so I wrote her a letter. At that point, I think I was in Idaho at that point. I had retired and I was living in Meridian, but I was going to be going over there to, um, it must have been a holiday or something like that, but I was driving over to, my brother and sister still live up there and I have relatives there. So I got the address and, unlike some people, I don't mind going into hospice or retirement centers or whatever. I used to volunteer for hospice for years and years. And, so I just went about, finding her and, bypassed a lot of the red tape that it takes. But I did find June, and her TV was really, really, really loud. And so, we eventually figured out how to turn it down a little bit. And there was a big sign in her door that said, "Beware of the dog." Well, there was no dog. But, she was, and the first thing she said to me, she goes, "Now, are you Pat's daughter that wore the red dress to the anniversary?" I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Well, you don't quite look the same." I looked at her and I was like, I don't think you quite look the same either. I mean, I don't think either one of us would have recognized each other because too many years had passed. And I think she was about 98 at that point, but she was very, very um, quick-minded, sort of when I shared about Lois and how, even in their 90s, they're just sharp as a tack and could answer all the questions and everything. And so she told me about her kids and one of her sons, I think Doug was his name, that he comes to the retirement center and he, wheels her downstairs and they eat a meal together every day. And so that meant a lot to her. And my experience of being around people in those age brackets or in hospice, they just really want and need attention, and most of the kids or the grandkids are, busy, busy with their own life, and they don't understand how much it means to them. And so, she had been painting and she had a lot of paintings around. She was in a kind of a smallish, probably more of a studio where there was doors, and so her bedroom was back there. And she kept kind of alluding back there, and then this nice living area. And so she had, I don't know if she took painting lessons or what. I mean, I don't think they were necessarily Picasso type paintings, but something that she really enjoyed doing. And so she had those, and so she, kind of shared with me what her life was like, and then we talked about my mom, and the kind of I kept kind of trying to go back into like the genealogy aspect, which I was still looking and hoping I was going to get some, juicy tidbits that could make me get past some of the really brick walls that I have. And I have gotten past, well, except for that young couple that died someplace, and what happened to them. But those are the ones that I talked about earlier, in other videos too, about when I was traveling through Iowa. And but she kind of then she started talking about genealogy, but all the genealogy she was talking about was her husband's genealogy, and interesting stories. And she went overseas and she went and visited all these different buildings, and historically she had just a wealth of information, and it was interesting. And I mean, I must have been there 2 or 3 hours probably, just sitting chatting with her. And you talk to somebody that's 98 years old, they've lived life that long, and they do have a longer story, than sometimes talking to a young person. um, and she was, kind of was going to be time fairly, after about 3 hours, I think, is when her son was going to come. And I was almost hoping, I didn't want to barge in, but I was hoping she might say, well, why don't you wait and meet him? Because I didn't know if he was interested in genealogy or not. And he does now show up on ancestry.com, and I haven't contacted him anymore after, the visit with uh, the visit with June. And she talked a lot about her family and her kids, um and I kept kind of I kept feeling like, you know, I kept going kind of around, getting back to the point where, so it's my grandma. my mom's mother, my grandma never talked about her dad very much at all, like nothing. And so June's mother was my grandmother's sister. And now Gladys, the sister, was older, and my grandmother was a little bit younger. But I don't know. I have pictures of Gladys, and the brothers and sisters, related to my grandma. I have those pictures. I don't think I ever met June's mother, and I haven't checked to see, if she died young or not. But she was down still in that area of Oregon, and so. So then, right towards the end of the visit, it was getting kind of like there really wasn't much more to talk about other than, why I was there. And so I explained to her that I was doing the genealogy and I was really struggling, um, with not so much Jesse, which would have been um, her sister's um, husband and the father. So he was, there's just a lot of communication there that was lost. And I know, as a quick reminder, I could kind of jog your memory maybe, but this was the one that went up to Homestead up in Canada. And then he came back through Idaho, and then he went to Oregon for a very short period of time, and that's when they got a divorce. And then he remarried, and he was gone. So anyway, June's kind of snickered, and she says, well, when I was a teenager, there was a knock on the door, and Gladys told June to go answer the door. And so June opened up the door. She had no idea who the man was, or, if she didn't know him at all. And he told her, I'm your um, mother's father. And so June ran and told her mom. Well, she said, well, invite him in. And so she took him into this kitchen dining area and was making tea for them. And so this would have been Jesse's uh, second wife, Minnie. And so Gladys was serving the tea and had some cookies or something like that, June said. And Gladys's dad said, well, I just wanted to come by and I wanted you to meet my new wife, and you can call her Mama. And June just stopped. She just stopped in her tracks. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop as she was telling this. She said literally her mother asked them to leave and forget the tea, forget the cookies, forget everything, get out of her house. And so they left. And June said she never ever talked to her dad again. And when he died, some of the other siblings went down and went to his funeral, and Gladys would not. She didn't want anything to do with that. So June basically grew up in that arena where you didn't talk about that at all. And so she never did any genealogy along those lines. So all the genealogy she was doing was on her husband's side. And so when she says, well, let me go get, what I have. And so she brought this box out. And basically, as she was taking the stuff out, it was all her husband's. And she took out some more and some more and some more and some more. So anyway, that was the empty box. So um, I left without any I wasn't upset. I mean, I was so great that I had the time with her and everything like that. But, in my mind, I really thought I was going to get some information and some stories or something that I could pass on to as I'm doing with the videos. Both my sister and brother are involved with the genealogy, and my sister is older, but she remembers a lot of the stories because she was around, about 3 years longer, and so she probably saw more people than I saw and put more together. And so, since I've done my um, doing my videos and everything, and she started watching them, and then, and she brings up some valid points that I've researched further, and she's brought up some memories that I would not have because I wouldn't have been born probably. Um, but yeah, so for me, this was it was an exercise, a futile exercise in, thinking I was going to get one thing and got the empty box. But her remembering the red dress after all those years at 98 years old, I mean, I thought that was kind of good. And then the Opa Loompa man is still there at the Tillamook Cheese Factory. I've not been back to Oregon since this all came up, and I don't know. I don't know what he does there, but to me, he was, so that was kind of my high for the trip. And so I did find out um, that where there is a comment, if you see where you could put a comment, um, I have been starting to get comments. I've also had kind of double people that have had said, well, I don't see where I can subscribe. And that's kind of important just from the standpoint of what's going on behind the scenes in with YouTube. And of course I can't duplicate it on my computer because I'm too, already in I'm subscribed and created, and so I, I just want to remind everybody, if you do see those, and do the thumbs up, and that you are enjoying these, and any suggestions that you have or questions. I know a lot of people right now that are watching, they're watching because of the stories. They like the stories. They're not related to me. They're not DNA matches, but they're really enjoying my journey. There's a certain amount of people I can tell if you're, they might ask you about your genealogy, but then you got to watch their eyes a little bit because they will start to glaze over, is what I call it. And talking about your own people and your own discoveries is a little bit different than if you're somebody else is telling you about those. And so that's just something that we all know and live with. But I'm glad you spent the afternoon with me, or at least this part of the afternoon. And oh yeah, and I have my sister says, you got to tell about the whatever necklace you have on. So this is turquoise and coral. And so, yeah, because I do make jewelry, and I have a small business online that I built, make my jewelry. So I will probably eventually at some point, when I get a little bit further along, I can put that link there if you want to go and look at what, I do earrings and necklaces mainly. And so anyway, it's been great being with you, and next time, bye.